The story is that the actor George Seaton goes to visit the other famous actor Edmund Gwynn, who was Santa Claus in Miracle on 34th Street, and goes to see him out at the actor's home. It's hard. He's down on his luck, living, on basically charity, and it's near the end, and the story goes, Seaton comes in, and Gwynn says, George, I don't like it. I don't like it a bit. There's no feeling of peace, no feeling of anticipation. George, it's awful. It's frightening, and I hate it. Not knowing what to say, Seaton goes, well, yes, old friend, I guess dying can be hard. And Gwynn thought about it for a moment, looked up at Seaton and said, yeah, but not as hard as playing comedy. Come on in. We're talking philosophy. Philosophy and comedy have made strange bedfellows for years. Aristophanes made fun of Socrates on 2 occasions in his plays. Voltaire enjoyed making fun of Leibniz in Candide. Diogenes the Cynic, Arthur Schopenhauer, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Bertrand Russell were all great wits. Indeed, Nietzsche proposed that the transcendence of the present age of tragedy and morality could only be performed by laughing lions. According to Norman Malcolm, Wittgenstein proposed teaching philosophy by means of jokes, and some have suggested that one or the other of his famous books was a satire of the other. And then, of course, there's Calvin and Hobbes. So philosophers seem to like comedy, and yet comedy has proved problematic for philosophers and theologians alike. Umberto Eco recognizes this in The Name of the Rose. We shall look at 3 specific ways in which humor creates a problem for people in The Name of the Rose. We shall look at comedy as subversion, comedy as extra-rational, and comedy as a perverse form of mindfulness. Comedy is subversive. Comedy turns the social order on its ear. Comedy raises the grotesque above the beautiful. Comedy has served as a tool for political and social reform since Aristophanes and his Lysistrata. I mean, isn't it true people would rather make love than war? Wouldn't they? Commonly accepted truths disappear under the eye of the comic. Fathers seldom run the households in comedies, implying that it probably happens no more often in reality. Comedians start in on political leaders, whether Thomas Nast on Boss Tweed or Walt Kelly on Joseph McCarthy. The power of the mighty begins to ebb away. Beaumarchais, the Barber of Seville, and the Marriage of Figaro were both banned, as they serve to demonstrate the folly of the class system and its inherent hypocrisy. The Emperor's New Clothes illustrates how laughing subverts anything. It's not that the emperor is nude, but rather that we believe he's dressed that subverts. And then our reversion to a more conventional judgment subverts the new fashion statement. William uses comedy first as a discourse and then as a tool to get information out of Jorge Burgos. It is told of St. Maurus that when the pagans put him in boiling water, he complained the bath was too cold. The pagan governor foolishly put his hand in the water to test it and burned himself. A fine action of that sainted martyr who ridiculed the enemies of the faith. Jorge sneered. Even in the episodes the preachers tell, there are many old wives' tales. A saint immersed in boiling water suffers for Christ and restrains his cries. He does not play childish tricks on the pagans. You see, William said, this story seems to you offensive to reason, and you accuse it of being ridiculous. Though you are controlling your lips, you are tacitly laughing at something. Nor do you wish me to take it seriously. You are laughing at laughter. But you are laughing. Jorge made a gesture of irritation. Jesting about laughter, you draw me into idle debate. But you know Christ did not laugh. I'm not sure of that. when he invites the Pharisees to cast the first stone, when he asks whose image is on the coin to be paid in tribute, when he plays on words and says, "Tu es Petrus." I believe he was making witticisms to confound sinners, to keep up the spirits of his disciples. He speaks with wit also when he says to Caiaphas, "Thou hast said it." But this comes after the great debate on comedy in the Name of the Rose. Examining the work of murdered monk Adelmo, William finds humor in many of the examples of Adelmo's illuminations. Gradually, the whole scriptorium becomes engaged by William's discussion. Then the other monks, who had followed the conversation a bit shyly, laughed heartily, as if they had been awaiting the librarian's consent. He frowned as the others continued laughing, praising the skill of poor Adelmo and pointing out to one another the more fantastic figures. And it was while all were still laughing that we heard at our backs a solemn and stern voice. "Verba vani aut risui apta non loqui," returned. The speaker was a monk bent under the weight of his years, an old man white as snow, not only his skin, but also his face and his pupils. I saw he was blind. The voice was still majestic and the limbs powerful, even if the body was withered by age. He stared at us as if he could see us, and always thereafter I saw him move and speak as if he still possessed the gift of sight. But the tone of his voice was that of one possessing only the gift of prophecy. "The man whom you see, venerable in age and wisdom," Malachi said to William, pointing out the newcomer, "is Jorge of Burgos, older than anyone else living in the monastery, save Alenardo of Grottaferrata. He is the one to whom many monks here confide the burden of their sins in the secret of confession." Then turning to the old man, he said, "The man standing before you is Brother William of Baskerville, our guest." "I hope my words did not anger you," the old man said in a curt tone. "I heard persons laughing at laughable things, and I reminded them of one of the principles of our rule. And as the psalmist says, if a monk must refrain from good speech because of his vow of silence, all the more reason he should avoid bad speech. And as there is bad speech, there are also bad images, and they are those that lie about the form of creation and show the world as the opposite of what it should be, has always been, and always will be throughout the centuries until the end of time. But you come from another order where I'm told that merriment, even the most inopportune sort, is viewed with indulgence." He was repeating what the Benedictines said about the eccentricities of St. Francis of Assisi, and perhaps also the bizarre whims attributed to those friars and spirituals of every kind who were the most recent and embarrassing offshoots of the Franciscan order. But William gave no sign of understanding the insinuation. "Marginal images often provoke smiles, but to edifying ends. As in sermons, to touch the imagination of devout throngs, it is necessary to introduce exempla, not infrequently jocular. So also the discourse of images must indulge in these trivia. For every virtue and for every sin, there is an example drawn from bestiaries, and animals exemplify the human world." "Oh, yes," the old man said mockingly, but without smiling. "Any image is good for inspiring virtue, provided the masterpiece of creation, turned with his head down, becomes the subject of laughter." What is the aim of this nonsense? A world that is the reverse and opposite of that established by God under the pretext of teaching divine precepts. "But as the Areopagite teaches," William said humbly, "God can only be named through the most distorted things. And Hugh of St. Victor reminded us that the more the simile becomes dissimilar, the more the truth is revealed to us under the guise of horrible and indecorous figures, the less the imagination is sated in carnal enjoyment, and is thus obliged to perceive the mysteries hidden under the turpitude of the images. I know that line of reasoning. and I confess with shame that it was the chief argument of our order when the Cluniac abbots battled the Cistercians. But St. Bernard was right. Little by little, the man who depicts monsters and portents of nature to reveal the things of God per speculum et in enigmate comes to enjoy the very nature of the monstrosities he creates and to delight in them. And as a result, he no longer sees except through them. You have only to look, you who still have your sight, at the capitals of our cloister. By now, it is more pleasurable for a monk to read marble than manuscript, and to admire the work of man than to meditate on the law of God. Shame for the desire of your eyes and for your smiles. The old man stopped, out of breath, and I admired the vivid memory, thanks to which, blind, perhaps for many years, he could still recall the images whose wickedness he decried. I was led to suspect they had greatly seduced him when he had seen them, since he could describe them with such passion. But it has often happened that I have found the most seductive depiction of sin in the pages of those very men of incorruptible virtue who condemn their spell and their effects. A sign that these men are impelled by such eagerness to bear witness to the truth that they do not hesitate, out of the love of God, to confer on evil all the seductions in which it cloaks itself. Thus the writers inform men better of the way through which the evil one enchants them. And in fact, Jorge's words filled me with a great desire to see the tigers and monkeys of the cloister, which I had not yet admired. But Jorge interrupted the flow of my thoughts because he resumed speaking in a much calmer tone. Our Lord did not have to employ such foolish things to point out the straight and narrow path to us. Nothing in his parable arouses laughter or fear. Adelmo, on the contrary, whose death you now mourn, took such pleasure in the monsters he painted that he lost sight of the ultimate things which they were to illustrate. And he followed all. I say, all. His voice became solemn and ominous. All the paths of monstrosity, which God knows how to punish. We see here the comedy is extra-rational. What do I mean? It goes above and beyond rationality. Let's make this point a little finer. To say that something is rational, to say that a person is rational, a decision is rational, a belief is rational, is to say that you have a reason for it, and that the reason connects to the belief by means of an argument. What I'm saying is that comedy is extra-rational. I'm saying that it results in decisions that are not truly founded on reasons, and certainly not tied by arguments. Jorge mentioned that Jesus didn't use fear to preach. I'm not so sure. But I'll grant that he didn't use horror. Now, horror is rational. We are confronted with something that fills us with fear, and the proper response to fear is fight or flight. So when we scream or cover our face or poop with delight, we are responding in a way that makes sense. That says, here is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. When I laugh at something, I can't always explain why I laugh. Indeed, there doesn't seem to be any universal explanation of why anyone laughs at anything. Furthermore, in reacting to laughter, what we are reacting to, unlike fear, is not something that makes sense to react to. Laughter neither leads us away or towards some particular goal. Laughter has no compulsion or logical content to it, and yet H.L. Mencken was right when he said that one horse laugh is worth 10,000 syllogisms. Now, for those of you who don't know what a syllogism is, it's an argument form first sketched out by Aristotle, where two premises are linked by a middle term, permitting a conclusion to be drawn deductively. A properly formed syllogism begins with these premises and leads to a conclusion that has to be true if the premises are true. Let me repeat that if the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true if your syllogism is properly constructed. There should be nothing more effective to convince people of the truth of some claim or statement than a well-formed syllogism. But Mencken is right. There is nothing more effective against a position or for a position than a genuine, healthy horse laugh. This is what worries Jorge of Burgos. Heaven will not be won by laughter. And what can result from laughing at hell? Surely not repentance or even good Christian behavior. Laughter elevates us in a way that nothing else can. It raises us above everyday life. It brings us out of the depths, the worst depths to which we may have descended. Laughter strikes back in a way that mere Christian goodness cannot. Laughter does not turn the other cheek. Laughter offers the cheek and then pulls it away as the slap comes, resulting in a swing and a miss. Yes, this kind of ridicule makes the situation more dangerous for the comic than it was before, but it increases the danger for the object of comedy as well, a danger that may have been non-existent before the interaction. If we can be rescued from the worst of life by learning to laugh, then what has Christianity to offer? Every good Sunday school student knows that Jesus wept, John 11:35. But the only reference I could find on laughter in the New Testament is Luke 6:21. Blessed are you that hunger now, for you shall be filled. Blessed are you that weep now, for you shall laugh. Nobody seems to laugh now, only in heaven. Indeed, Jesus is identified throughout history as the man of sorrows. And this goes for the marginalia we were discussing today. Jorge could not keep from commenting in a low voice. John Chrysostom said that Christ never laughed. Nothing in his human nature forbade it, William remarked, because laughter, as the theologians teach, is proper to man. The Son of Man could laugh, but it is not written that he did so, Jorge said sharply, quoting Petrus Cantor. But when St. Lawrence was placed on the gridiron, William whispered with a saintly air, at a certain point he invited his executioners to turn him over, saying that that side was already cooked, as Prudentius also recalls in the Peristephanon. St. Lawrence, therefore, knew how to say ridiculous things, even if it was to humiliate his enemies. Which proves that laughter is something very close to death and the corruption of the body, Jorge replied with a snarl, and I must admit that he spoke like a good logician. And St. Lawrence's comment is the kind of humor made in the moment, a reminder that laughter helps us transcend the here and now. It is meditation at 90 degrees. No longer wrapped up in quotidian issues or egoistic reflection, laughter puts us into a state of mindfulness that Zen masters were willing to address, but conventional Christianity has not been able to. Early Christian ascetics meditated on pillars in the desert. None was famous for his humor. Other than St. Lawrence, I really can't think of a Christian martyr finding any humor in their situation. And yet it is clear that laughter succeeds in purifying the spirit in an entirely different way than meditation or martyrdom. The mindfulness of comedy can be a vicious thing. For all that it is purgative, like any purge, it brings up the bad as well as the good. We can become as transcendent in the moment as in deep meditation, but the focus of that mindfulness might be human pain and suffering. I believe this double-edged element of comedy is why it has not proven as successful a tool in philosophy as one might think. We are all aware of the distinction between laughing at someone and laughing with someone. This element of heartlessness that is innate to comedy endangers both the philosopher who would use it and the philosopher who would avoid it. In the case of William and Adzo, laughter leads to a challenge to the existence of God and the disruption of their entire philosophical and theological program. It is this double-edged element that reminds us of the classic complaint of the comedian. No one takes me seriously. How can we take the comic seriously? To do so undermines the whole point of comedy. Mark Twain suggested that persons trying to find a moral in Huckleberry Finn should be punished. And yet Huckleberry Finn is filled with morality. Nietzsche proposed that laughter would carry us beyond the stage of tragedy and morality. As I've already suggested, that happens to William and Adzo. Once again, the dual nature of comedy rears its head. Perhaps that's why philosophers and theologians end up not using such a potent weapon. Nietzsche calls laughter a Dionysian and irrational part of human nature. The problem with the Dionysian is it's uncontrollable. It goes where it will and takes us with it. We may gain power by riding the wave, but like any surfer, we can't direct the wave. And this points to another problem. In comedy, the message might get lost in the laughter. In tragedy, the message is generally the plot. If you don't like the message, you will not like the plot. But in the wildness of laughter, we may find the message slips past us entirely while we're enjoying the entertainment.